yesterday I had the privilege to sit down with Andrew Clay Schaefer, and what I said to Andrew was basically, I don't think anyone's going to come to save us right now. Like, sure, there are lots of government agencies doing the best that they can, but I don't think it's going to be enough, frankly. And the thing that kind of freaks me out is how many people are going to suffer and how many people are going to die as a result of this pandemic, and as a result of us not being prepared to deal with it. And Andrew just sort of like calmed me down. He said, hang on, the world isn't actually ending. A lot of people are going to be hurt, but what we actually have right now is an opportunity. And I know not everyone here is from the United States, but kind of one of the big weird things right now is how suddenly things like universal basic income are on the table, healthcare for all are on the table, and the US is so staunchly against this kind of thing, right? But very suddenly, because health for one of us very suddenly impacts health for all of us, suddenly we care. So that fills me with hope. It fills me with the idea that we're not stuck here. And so today is mostly just a space. Here's a space. We've got a bunch of smart people on the call. And what I'm going to do is be a facilitator and help kind of guide the conversation. But it's where we go with this is largely up to you.
Yeah, I want to explore how people are realizing how interconnected we are already. Because people talk about societies, isolation, countries, different economies, independence. Now, do they realize how interconnected we are when it comes to fighting something external to us?
To expand on that, in terms of bringing that back to mapping the interconnectedness, I've been thinking about Burja mapping a lot recently, and potentially looking at national and local levels, doing some Burja mapping, seeing if there's pathways of influence maybe people aren't considering to influence various measures on coronavirus.
And for those who aren't familiar with what Burja mapping is, I threw a link to some materials in chat. Definitely, that's a great thing we could explore. And Burja mapping is focused on power, so lots of interesting stuff we can explore there as well. Any other thoughts that people want to explore?
I also wonder if we explore Burja mapping, we will come to know how these world leaders have tackled the problem of COVID-19. Each of these countries tackled it differently with their own understanding of the problem. Some took it lightly, some didn't. They didn't share the common knowledge, or they didn't share the best practices earlier, and therefore, as power, if we say the world power could not control COVID. It was a simple thing to do, but it's most difficult to execute at the world level.
Yeah, I think so. Burja mapping, just a very short version of it, it's a way of examining through the lens of something called empire theory, which is basically empires are fractal units of organization. So like an empire could be a government, an empire could be a team inside a company. It's like however you draw the boundaries, inside those boundaries, there tend to be high, mid, and low power players. But then also there are out power players who just aren't part of that empire. And so to the extent that you could use that to explore world leader responses, definitely that's an option.
I've also been playing around a bit, Ben, with adding influence pathways separate from the power dynamics. And I think that would really help with Manish's question.
I'd very much like to explore the longer-term economic effect of this. I was in a Cognitive Edge presentation earlier today, Dave Snowden, and he's really clear that pretty much every nation on the planet will be bankrupt inside 3 months. And that could well represent the most enormous opportunity for looking at, can we actually think about creating a post-economic world?
Yeah, that's a wonderful point, because my third point was economy is tricky, and can human beings live without it? For example, price of a bread versus bread itself. Because when I was a kid, I used to buy a chocolate bar, say $5. Now it's $20. But chocolate bar is a chocolate bar. It's just the chocolate bar. So who decides who is worthy of it as a human being versus as a rich or poor person?
Yeah, very good. I've already had it impressed upon me that we've actually solved pretty much all of the material problems of humanity, but thanks to economics, we don't distribute them evenly.
Yeah.
And so while this is a dreadful thing that's happening right now, and I'm just appalled that I've lived to see this, understanding how emotion works, it's a series of events within one, and you can map that onto society. You have a stimulus that produces some kind of response that in an individual is typically a physiological response ready for some action that is designed to restore you to where you were before. That assumes that the context is the same as it was at the beginning. It gets dysfunctional if you get stuck. Your feelings are an awareness of this. So I'm thinking of a lot of the work that we're doing right now as being like a social metaphor for individual feelings. But what's important is to work right the way through it and recognize that at the far end, it probably won't be the same world that it was at the beginning. Yeah. Right?
There is no rolling back.
Another aspect that I've been seeing is differences in perceived vulnerability towards this. Where I spend my weekends tends to be a rural area, and even people in their 70s there are regarding this more of an inconvenience rather than a direct threat. Whereas I live in an urban area, and people are taking it much more immediately, even people in their 30s, as feeling that they too are very much part of this, that it's not merely an inconvenience, that this is a direct threat to their ongoing existence and those near and dear to them. Yeah. And this in turn is affecting their behavior in multiple facets and dimensions.
So on that topic, one other lens that I've been thinking about or looking at this for is sort of thinking through of COVID-19 through sort of a conversion funnel lens, looking at like Dave McClure's pirate metrics and sort of mapping things out that way in terms of acquisition, activation, retention, referral, that sort of model, and then looking at theory of constraints and are there bottlenecks we can create that other people haven't thought of. So that's another lens I'll just throw out there. I don't know if we'll end up talking about it.
So I had a viewpoint on some of the things that we're thinking about is that because of all the supply so I'll watch on the theory constraints. There's some supply chain issues here that I would like to explore, that because of the world is now so interconnected that there are companies that are relying on companies that may, like big, let's call it Fortune 500 companies that may be relying on very small companies to do their business that may not survive. What are the opportunities from, okay, the spending habits in the economy is just going to crater for the next 3 months to a year. Let's just throw out some round numbers. And what are the effects and opportunities out there to go grab?
We're still kind of just bouncing about a couple of ideas about what exactly we would want the world to look at when this is over. A couple of things I'm seeing is there are lots of great ideas, but it seems like they're kind of ideas that are further down the pipeline. What might be interesting would be to look at what might be possibly like what are the first steps or what would be a good foundation. I think it was Andrew was saying that, you can't change people's values because they have identity linked to it and they'll have a natural reactance to it. And a lot of the big ideas we have do involve at some level possibly changes in what people's fundamental values are. So it would be interesting to sort of perhaps if people had a few ideas about what might be sort of those first baby steps that could move us or begin to shift the story towards this new values that we would like to adopt at in the post-economic world that our ideal of a post-economic world.
I think we have more questions than answers, Ben.
Excellent. Perfect.
So I think one of the questions that came up was how is liveness affecting our ability to respond to Corona, and how does that trade off against sort of general competence? That's one of the questions that came up for me, at least.
We first understood what these maps were, and then we tried to look at what the US version would be like and the UK version. Get time to go back through and kind of validate any of it, or combine them, or contrast them, or anything. But we certainly learned some more about this mapping. Lots of questions have kind of come up for me during the process, just around this idea of liveness, which is quite interesting. This potential to do something new, as far as I understand it, and how influence works in this mapping system. Interesting, very interesting.
And I think one point we emphasized was Ebola versus COVID-19 that's handled by US, and they had a similar bureaucracy, similar experts, same experts around, but the leaders responded differently and the results are different. So the influence mattered here, perhaps, and ability to challenge mattered, while in some administrations where challenge is celebrated, I think they would be more likely to take better decisions and faster decisions than where higher power thinks that whatever they are doing is right, they would end up in a disaster.
Yeah, I really like your analogy, Manish, between like the pioneer, settler, town planner, and liveness, and sort of mapping each of those to a separate level of liveness. I think is a really cool concept, which makes me think that when we're talking about liveness in relation to power, it depends on the context. If you're in a very rapidly changing context, then the people in power are going to want more liveness so that they can keep up, so they don't lose their power due to change. If you're in a context that's not changing, then the people in power don't need liveness as much and don't want liveness as much, because change will lead them to losing power.
Chaps, I've got to say goodbye. I've got to put the kids to bed. See you on another mapping show. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for being here.
Ben. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for teaching me this other version of mapping, which is great. Thanks, guys.
So here we are. We are saying goodbye.
All right. See you later, guys.
Thanks,
See you, guys.
Take it easy.
Bye. And be at home. Be safe.